The morning sun cast long shadows across the presidential palace in Ouagadougou as Captain Ibrahim Traoré reviewed security briefings. His aide Moussa burst through the heavy wooden doors with unusual urgency in his steps. The young president looked up from classified documents, sensing something extraordinary was about to unfold. Outside, the sounds of the bustling capital mixed with distant calls to prayer echoing across the city. The familiar rhythm of daily life continued, unaware that history was about to pivot on this moment. Traoré's weathered hands, still bearing calluses from his days, as a soldier reached the sealed envelope Moussa extended. Mon Captain, this arrived through diplomatic channels just minutes ago. Moussa whispered, his voice trembling slightly. The envelope bore the distinctive logo of America's Most. Watch News Network, its red and blue colors stark against the cream paper. Traoré's dark eyes narrowed as he broke. The wax seal, his military training, making him cautious of unexpected communications. The letter inside was brief, but carried weight that seemed to fill the entire room with tension. As he read, his expression shifted from curiosity to calculated determination, understanding the global implications of what was being proposed. The invitation was not just to appear on television. It was a summons to a battlefield of truth. Word of the invitation spread quickly through the palace corridors like wildfire in Hamadan season. Senior advisors gathered in hushed circles, debating whether the president should accept such a provocative challenge. The older ministers, scarred by decades of Western manipulation, urged extreme caution and potential rejection. Yet the younger members of Traoré's inner circle saw an unprecedented opportunity to address the world directly. Their animated discussions echoed off the marble floors, mixing French, Mo, and English in passionate exchanges. The weight of representing not just Burkina Faso, but the dignity of all Africa, pressed heavy on every mind present. As evening prayers began across Ouagadougou, Traoré stood alone on his office balcony, overlooking the city he had sworn to protect. The call to prayer seemed louder tonight, as if the ancestors themselves were calling for courage in the face of this monumental decision. His reflection in the window showed a man aged beyond his years by the burden of leadership and revolution. The letter lay open on his desk behind him, its words seeming to glow in the lamplight like a challenge written in fire. Tomorrow would bring consultations, debates, and careful planning, but tonight belonged to contemplation and prayer. The young captain who had once dreamed of a free Africa now faced a chance to speak that dream to the entire world. The emergency council meeting convened at dawn, filling the palace's main conference room with Burkina Faso's most trusted voices. Defense Minister Kaber slammed his fist on the mahogany table, his weathered face etched with concern and frustration. This is a trap, Ibrahim. They want to humiliate you on their platform in front of their audience. Foreign Affairs Advisor Aminata Sadu nodded gravely, her diplomatic experience warning against such exposure to hostile media. The room buzzed with heated exchanges as coffee grew cold and forgotten cups around the circular table. Tro sat silently at the head, absorbing every argument while his fingers drummed a rhythmic pattern on the polished wood. But what if this is our moment? Interrupted Dr. Ouagadougou, the youngest member of the inner circle. Her eyes blazed with the fire of a new generation that refused to bow to Western intimidation tactics. For too long, our stories have been told by others, our truths twisted by their narratives and lies. She stood pacing behind her chair as passion filled her, voice with unmistakable conviction and purpose. Captain Sankara spoke truth too. Power and his words still echo across this continent decades later. Though the mention of Burkina Faso's revolutionary martyr sent a reverent silence through the room like morning mist. Even the skeptics felt the weight of that legacy, pressing down on their shoulders. Outside, the people of Ouagadougou went about their daily routines, unaware. Their president contemplated a decision that could reshape their nation's destiny. Market vendors called out prices for millet and plantains, while children played football in dusty streets. The aroma of grilled meat and Spices drifted through open windows, mixing with the sounds of honking motorcycles. But inside the palace, time seemed suspended as advisors debated the wisdom of accepting America's challenge. Trier's military aide whispered updates about social media, buzz already, surrounding rumors of the invitation. The digital age had made secrets harder to keep, and the world was beginning to watch as afternoon heat shimmered off. The palace courtyard Traore finally raised his hand for silence in the council chamber. His voice carried the quiet authority that had led a successful revolution just years before. Against overwhelming odds, they expect us to remain silent, to accept their version of our story without question or resistance. He stood slowly, his uniform crisp, despite hours of intense deliberation and the weight of momentous decision. But what they don't understand is that silence has never been the African way. When truth demands speaking, the room held its collective breath as their leader words settled like seeds in fertile ground. The die was cast. Ibrahim Traoré would accept the invitation and face whatever consequences awaited. The black SUV convoy wound through Manhattan's concrete canyons. As evening descended over the restless city, Ibrahim Traoré gazed through bulletproof glass, a towering skyscrapers that seemed to scrape the very heavens above. His security detail maintained radio silence while navigating traffic thick with yellow taxis and honking horns. The contrast between Ouagadougou's red earth and New York's steel jungle struck him with profound clarity. Behind him, his press secretary reviewed final talking points one last time before the cameras rolled. The weight of representing Africa's dignity pressed heavier with each passing city block they traveled. Inside the news studio, technicians made final adjustments to lighting rigs that would broadcast his image worldwide. The anchor, a seasoned journalist known for her aggressive interviewing style, reviewed her questions with predatory focus. Camera operators tested angles, while sound engineers calibrated microphones to capture every whispered word and telling. Pause. The studio's cold atmosphere contrasted sharply with the warm hospitality Traore was accustomed to back home. Producers huddled around monitors, their excitement barely contained as they sensed potential television gold brewing tonight. The red Onair sign loomed like a warning beacon above the entrance doors. Traore entered the studio with the measured stride of a soldier approaching a known battlefield. His simple military uniform stood in stark contrast to the anchor's expensive designer suit and polished appearance. The handshake between them lasted exactly 3 seconds, neither yielding ground in this first tactical engagement. Makeup artists applied powder to reduce shine under the harsh studio lights that would expose every emotion. His translator sat nearby, though Traoré's English had improved dramatically since taking power through revolutionary means. The countdown began. 60 seconds until the world would witness this unprecedented confrontation between powers. As the final seconds ticked away, Traoré closed his eyes and whispered a prayer his grandmother taught him. The studio fell silent except for the hum of electronic equipment and the distant rumble of city traffic. His hands rested calmly on the interview table, showing no sign of the tension coursing through veins. The anchor shuffled her papers one final time, her smile sharp as a predator, sensing wounded prey. Red lights began, blinking on cameras positioned around them like digital vultures waiting to feast on controversy. The moment had arrived. Captain Ibrahim Traoré was about to speak truth to the most powerful empire. The red recording light blazed alive as the anchors practiced. Smiles spread across her face like ice. Good evening. I'm Sarah Mitchell, and tonight we have a very special guest joining us live. Her voice carried the polished authority of someone accustomed to controlling narratives and shaping public opinion worldwide. Traoré sat, motionless, his dark eyes fixed on hers with the intensity of a predator studying prey. The studio lights cast dramatic shadows across his weathered face, highlighting scars earned in battles for freedom. Behind the cameras, producers leaned forward, sensing the electric tension crackling between their two formidable guests. Captain True, thank you for joining us despite your busy schedule overthrowing democratic governments in Africa. The anchor's words drip with calculated venom, designed to provoke an emotional reaction from her target. Her research team had prepared character assassinations disguised as legitimate questions, each one crafted to diminish his credibility. Traore's expression remained unchanged, though his fingers tightened almost imperceptibly against the interview table's polished surface. Years of military discipline had taught him patience in the face of deliberate provocation and hostile fire. The first shot had been fired, but he would choose the battlefield for his response carefully. Ms. Mitchell, I came here tonight to speak truth to your audience, not to play games. His accented English carried the weight of conviction that had inspired a nation to rise up. The anchor's eyebrow arched slightly, surprised by his direct refusal to accept her loaded premise without challenge. Behind her confident facade, uncertainty flickered like a candle, flame in dangerous wind, as control began slipping away. Traore leaned forward, slightly, his military bearing commanding attention. Even in this hostile foreign environment designed to intimidate, the real interview was just beginning, and both participants knew the stakes had suddenly escalated dramatically. But, Captain, your critics say you've destabilized the region through military coups and anti-Western rhetoric. She pressed forward with another prepared attack, her voice rising with manufactured indignation and false concern. The teleprompter fed her additional talking points designed to keep him on the defensive throughout. However, Traore's slight smile suggested he had anticipated this exact line of questioning from Western media. His pause stretched long enough to create tension, the silence filling television screens across America. When he finally spoke, his word would shatter the carefully constructed narrative they had prepared. The lion was about to show his claws to the world, watching in anticipation. Ms. Mitchell, let me show your audience what your government doesn't want them to see. Traore reached into his jacket, producing a folder that seemed to electrify the entire studio atmosphere. The anchor's confident smile faltered as he opened documents bearing official American government seals and classifications. Her producers frantically whispered into headsets, unsure whether to cut the feed or let this explosive moment unfold. The camera zoomed closer as Traore held up bank transfer records showing millions flowing to corrupt politicians. His voice remained steady as he spoke. These are payments from your CIA to overthrow legitimate leaders. The studio fell into stunned silence as Traore displayed photograph after photograph of secret meetings and handwritten agreements. Here is your Secretary of State shaking hands with the man who sold our uranium for pennies. His finger traced across images that would destroy carefully maintained diplomatic facades and international reputations worldwide. The anchor's face had gone pale, her earpiece buzzing with urgent instructions from network executives upstairs. Behind the cameras, security guards moved closer, though uncertain about their authority over a sitting head of state. Each document, Traore revealed, struck like lightning bolts, illuminating decades of hidden American interference in African sovereignty. For 70 years, you have pillaged our continent while preaching democracy to the world's cameras. Oh! Traore's voice rose with controlled passion that resonated through television speakers across multiple continents and time zones. His military training kept his hand steady as he held up contracts signed by American corporations for resource extraction. The anchor tried desperately to interrupt, but his presence had become magnetic, drawing viewers into his narrative web. Phone calls were flooding the network switchboard as audiences demanded to see more of these shocking revelations. Social media exploded with screenshots and video clips spreading faster than wildfire across digital platforms everywhere. The folder seemed bottomless as Traore produced recording transcripts of conversations between American officials and African dictators. Listen to your own words. Keep them fighting each other so they forget who's stealing their wealth. His pronunciation of each English word was deliberate, ensuring no meaning was lost. In translation, or misunderstood, the anchor's professional composure cracked, completely as she realized her interview had become a public tribunal. Studio technicians looked between their equipment and the unfolding drama, unsure whether they were witnessing journalism or revolution. The truth was spreading live across airwaves, and there was no stopping its devastating momentum. Now, the studio's landline phone rang with an urgency that cut through the tense atmosphere like a blade. Producer Jenkins grabbed his headset, his face draining of color as he listened to instructions from upstairs. "Ma'am, we have the former president on line 1, demanding to speak immediately." Sarah Mitchell's eyes widened as she realized the gravity of a situation unfolding beyond her control. The red recording light continued to pulse as millions watched. This unprecedented moment in live television history. Traore sat calmly, organizing his damning documents while chaos erupted around him in the studio. "Put him through," Mitchell stammered, her journalistic instincts overriding common sense and network protocols entirely. The phone speaker crackled to life, and Trump's unmistakable voice filled the studio with volcanic rage. "This is completely fake news," Traore is lying about everything, making up these ridiculous stories. His words tumbled over each other in a torrent of fury and desperation that shocked viewers. The former president's breathing was audible through the speakers, heavy with the weight of exposed secrets. Studio cameras captured Troe's slight smile as his adversary revealed himself through uncontrolled emotional outbursts. "Mr. Trump, the documents speak for themselves," Traore replied with devastating calm that contrasted sharply with the chaos. His voice carried the authority of someone who had fought real battles, not just Twitter wars. "Your signature is on these contracts. Your voice is on these recorded conversations we possess." Trump's response exploded through the speakers. "You have nothing. This is a witch hunt by enemies." The former president's denial only served to validate the evidence spread across the interview table. Viewers across America watched their former leader's composure completely disintegrate in real time on national television. The phone line crackled with Trump's continued ranting as network executives frantically debated cutting the explosive feed entirely. "I made deals to help America, not to steal from anybody. Believe me," his defensive protest rang hollow against the mountain of evidence Traore had methodically presented to the world. Social media exploded with clips of the meltdown spreading faster than the network could control or contain. The anchor sat frozen, realizing she had lost complete control of what was supposed to be her show. History was being written live on television, and there was no stopping the avalanche of truth. Now, with Trump's desperate voice still echoing through the studio speakers, Traore calmly reached for a second folder. "Since you're listening, Mr. Trump, let me share what you told President Kabor in 2019. His steady hands revealed a transcript that made the anchor's eyes widen with journalistic hunger and terror. The document showed direct quotes about keeping Africans busy fighting each other while we extract their gold. Trump's voice exploded through the phone. "That's completely fabricated. I never said those words to anyone." But Traore had already produced the audio recording device, pressing play for the world to hear. The former president's own voice filled the studio, damning him with his own recorded words. "You see, Mr. Trump, we record everything when American officials visit our continent these days." Traore's smile carried the satisfaction of a hunter who had patiently waited for the perfect moment. The audio quality was crystal clear, capturing every inflection of Trump's voice discussing resource extraction strategies. Behind the cameras, network executives huddled in panic, torn between ratings gold and potential lawsuits looming ahead. The anchor tried to regain control. "Captain, how did you obtain these sensitive recordings from?" "Private meetings." But viewers were transfixed by the unfolding revelation of decades of systematic exploitation and governmental deception. Social media platforms crashed under the weight of millions, sharing clips simultaneously across the globe. Traore produced photographs of uranium shipments leaving African ports with falsified manifests. and American military escorts. Here is your foreign aid program. Trucks full of our uranium heading to your weapons facilities. Each image told a story of systematic theft disguised as international cooperation and humanitarian assistance. Programs. The phone line had gone ominously silent as Trump's advisors likely cut his connection to prevent further damage. Studio security moved nervously, unsure whether to protect their guest or escort him out immediately under orders. The revelations kept coming like waves of a storm, each one more damaging than the last. The children of Niger are starving, while their uranium powers your cities and military installations worldwide. Traore's voice carried the weight of moral authority that transcended politics and national boundaries. Completely, his final document showed bank accounts in Swiss banks linked directly to American politicians and African dictators. The numbers were staggering. Billions stolen from the world's poorest continent over decades of systematic exploitation. Network phone lines jammed with calls from viewers demanding answers and government officials demanding immediate censorship. The truth had been unleashed, and no amount of damage control could contain its devastating global impact. Within minutes of Traore's explosive revelations, social media platforms erupted into digital warfare across every continent simultaneously. Twitter hashtags, Church Traore Files, and African Truth began trending worldwide as clips spread faster than network censors could respond. Government officials in Washington held emergency meetings while European leaders scrambled to assess their own exposure risks. The Chinese embassy released a statement within the hour calling for full transparency in international resource agreements. African Union headquarters in Addis Ababa buzzed with activity as member nations demanded immediate investigation into the allegations. Phone calls flooded from world capitals as the diplomatic fallout began spreading like wildfire across the globe. In Burkina Faso's capital, crowds gathered spontaneously around television screens, broadcasting the interview to stun audiences everywhere. Celebrations erupted in the streets as citizens realized their young president had exposed decades of exploitation. Finally, someone tells the truth about what they've done to us, shouted market vendor Fatima Ouagadougou. University. Students poured out of dormitories, chanting Traore's name and singing revolutionary songs throughout the night. The mood was electric with pride and vindication after years of being dismissed by Western powers. Similar scenes played out across African capitals as the continent watched one of their own speak truth. European parliament members demanded emergency sessions while French President Macron's office issued carefully worded denials and deflections. British intelligence agencies worked overtime to assess potential damage to their own African operations and investments. The German chancellor's spokesman called the revelations concerning while promising thorough investigation into any German involvement. Stock markets in London and Paris fluctuated wildly as mining companies faced scrutiny over their African contracts. Swiss banking authorities announced reviews of accounts linked to the exposed financial networks and transactions. The tremors of Traore's revelations were shaking the foundations of international power structures everywhere. Back in the New York studio, Sarah Mitchell sat in stunned silence as her producers counted record viewership numbers. The interview had become the most watched political broadcast in television history within just 2 hours of airing. International news networks scrambled to obtain copies of the documents Traore had displayed on camera. The Burkina Faso embassy in Washington was surrounded by journalists demanding additional information and government responses. CIA headquarters remained ominously silent while congressional leaders called for immediate hearings and investigations into the allegations. The world would never be the same after this single night of unprecedented truth-telling on live television. Congressional hearing rooms in Washington filled with senators demanding immediate investigations into the explosive Traore revelations from the previous night. House Speaker Johnson called emergency sessions while FBI Director Wray faced hostile questioning about intelligence failures. How did a Small African nation obtained classified documents that exposed decades of our operations, demanded Senator Warren. The Justice Department announced multiple grand juries would investigate the banking records and uranium. Contracts shown on television. Swiss authorities froze 17 bank accounts linked to the financial networks Traore had exposed to the world. Within 48 hours, 3 senior State Department officials had resigned while claiming they were following orders. Trump's legal team worked frantically to contain the damage from his televised meltdown and recorded conversations worldwide. Emergency motions were filed claiming the audio recordings were illegally obtained and potentially due by foreign intelligence services. My client was clearly under duress during those private diplomatic conversations. His lawyer told reporters outside Manhattan courthouse. But audio forensics experts confirmed the recording's authenticity on every major news network broadcasting across America. Special Prosecutor Jack Smith announced expanded investigations into Trump's African business dealings during his presidency term. The former president's Truth social account erupted with increasingly desperate denials and conspiracy theories about the evidence. International Criminal Court prosecutors in The Hague announced preliminary examinations into potential war crimes and systematic resource theft. African Union lawyers filed formal complaints with the World Trade Organization and United Nations Security Council. French mining giant ERA faced criminal charges in Paris courts for their role in uranium extraction schemes. British Petroleum's African operations came under scrutiny as parliamentary committees demanded testimony from corporate executives involved. The European Union suspended several aid programs pending investigation into whether funds were used to facilitate corruption. Global mining stocks crashed as investors fled companies with African exposure amid the widening scandal. In Ouagadougou, President Traore addressed his nation from the same palace balcony where he had contemplated this decision. We have shown the world that truth is more powerful than their weapons or money, he declared. Crowds of thousands filled the streets below, waving Burkina Faso flags and chanting for African unity. Other African leaders began releasing their own evidence of Western exploitation and interference in their nations. The continent was awakening to its own power through coordinated resistance to decades of systematic abuse. Traore's courage had ignited a revolutionary movement that would reshape international relations forever across multiple continents, and generations of presidential jet touched down at Ouagadougou International Airport as thousands of citizens lined the runway and terminal buildings. Traditional drums thundered across the tarmac while women ululated in celebration of their returning hero's triumph. Traore emerged from the aircraft to see his nation transformed. Flags waving from every rooftop and balcony. Children held handmade signs reading "Our Lion Spoke Truth" in French, Moor, and English languages. The crowd's energy was electric, charged with pride and hope for a future free from foreign manipulation. As his feet touched African soil, Traore felt the weight of ancestral approval settling on his shoulders. The motorcade through Ouagadougou became a spontaneous festival. As citizens poured into streets from every neighborhood, vendors closed their stalls to join the celebration while students abandoned classes to witness history unfolding. He showed them, "We are not afraid," shouted grandmother Aminata, tears streaming down her weathered cheeks. The procession moved slowly through crowds that seemed to grow larger with each passing block. Market women threw flower petals, while men drummed rhythms that echoed across the red earth. This was more than a homecoming. It was the birth of a new African consciousness. At the palace, Traore addressed the nation from steps where colonial governors once proclaimed foreign dominion. Today, Africa stands taller because we refuse to bow to their intimidation and lies, he declared. His words were broadcast live across the continent as other African leaders watched with newfound courage. The speech was simultaneously translated into dozens of African languages, reaching communities from Senegal to South Africa. Behind him stood the flag of Burkina Faso, but his message belonged to all of Africa. The revolution, he had started with courage which spread like Hamadan winds across the continent. As evening descended over the capital, Traore stood alone in his office, looking out at a city, celebrating. Freedom, the documents that had shaken the world, lay organized on his desk, symbols of truce power. Phone calls came from African presidents requesting copies of evidence against their own former colonial masters. The young captain, who had dreamed of sovereignty, had become the voice of an entire continent. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and inevitable retaliation from exposed powers. But tonight belonged to Africa. The dawn of true independence was finally breaking across the continent his ancestors had always envisioned. Ibrahim Traore's explosive revelations changed history forever, proving that one courageous voice can expose decades of lies. The truth shocked the world, but Africa finally stood proud. What's your take on these shocking revelations? Subscribe for more untold stories and share your thoughts in the comments below.